Hello, I'm Diana Bel Belluz, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this WebShare presentation. A recording of today's session will be made available to all registrants. We'll begin by having the three co-founders of Claridec introduce themselves.
My name is Henk Krijnen. I'm an engineer by background and have had a career of 35 years with Shell in Indonesia, Thailand, the United States and the Netherlands. Over time I moved from technical to economics roles. The last 5 years I was in corporate strategy and planning in The Hague. That's where I've learned about scenario planning and how to apply this approach for business problems. In 2015 I started a consultancy called Navencerta, Navigating Uncertainty.
Hi, my name is Craig Mitchell, based in Scotland, UK, and I have over 20 years experience in the energy sector. I've worked for a variety of organisations, primarily a large part of my career at Chevron, learning structured decision making. As an employee and a consultant with 6TQ, I've supported project teams and decision makers facilitating quality decision making.
I'm Diana Bel Belluz. I have over 30 years experience in the fields of risk management and risk assessment. In 2001, I established my company RiskWise to help organizations manage risk more proactively and more robustly. I do that by showing them how to integrate a risk lens into their decision-making and corporate culture. At Claridec, our mission is to enable organizations to achieve clarity on important decisions. We believe that better clarity enables better decisions, and that ultimately generates more value for an organization's stakeholders. We carry out our mission by providing upskilling services, both in-house customized programs as well as an open registration masterclass program. We advocate an approach we call decision clarity. It takes the best concepts from a broad spectrum of decision support disciplines and integrates them to deliver superior clarity by overcoming the biggest challenges organizations face when making decisions under uncertainty and risk. As part of our mission, we provide education on decision clarity concepts. In this WebShare series, we address three common challenges with decision making. The first is keeping an eye on the long term. A couple of weeks ago, my colleague Hank delivered a WebShare on scenario planning as an enrichment of ERM. The second common issue we'll address is linking risk to decision making, and that's the subject of today's WebShare that I'll present on merging risk management and decision science. And the third issue in our WebShare series is taking a holistic perspective from the start. In a couple of weeks, my colleague Craig Mitchell will present a WebShare on integrated framing. Many of the ideas I will share today are drawn from a chapter I authored on leveraging ERM for growth. The chapter is part of the textbook, Enterprise Risk Management, Today's Leading Research and Best Practices for Tomorrow's Executives. It was published by Wiley earlier this year. We'll be providing all of today's WebShare registrants with a complimentary PDF copy of the chapter. Our agenda today will start by understanding two different perspectives on supporting decisions under uncertainty and risk that exist in the disciplines of decision sciences and risk management. Then we'll identify the unrealized potential of the two disciplines as they are typically practiced today. We'll explore some integration opportunities to bridge the silos between decision sciences and risk management. And finally, we'll suggest some strategies you can take to advance towards a better risk lens in decision making. Let's dive in. So, as my colleague Hank Krijnen and I discovered when we met, whether people come from a risk management background like me or a decision science background like Hank, they have a common goal of supporting solid decision making under conditions of uncertainty and risk. They just come to it through a different door or perspective, one focused on risks and the other on decisions. Let's look at why these two perspectives have emerged. The growth cycle concept that Hank introduced in the first WebShare gives us a clue as to where these two perspectives come from. Today, I'll take us deeper into the growth cycle to understand what drives these different perspectives on decision-making under uncertainty and risk. Phase 1 of the cycle is strategic visioning, and at that phase, it's about deciding how the organization will generate value. It typically includes defining the business model and the direction and strategies to generate success for the company in the future. For Phase 1, the focus is on risks, both threats and opportunities, that are coming in the future. What's coming down the line at us? This phase is the focus of the strategic planning discipline. However, as discussed in the previous web share, advanced organizations also use scenario planning to ensure a long-term perspective is considered. In other words, a perspective that goes beyond the horizon of the strategic plan. Phase 2 is transitioning, and it takes the organization from its existing business configuration to the evolved configuration envisaged in Phase 1. It involves choosing and resourcing investments, projects, and initiatives that are the stepping stones that will position the organization for future success. For Phase 2, the goal is to make high-quality decisions on the major strategic investments, projects, and initiatives that will enable the organization to deliver sustained value. Phase 2 looks at risk from the perspective of the threats and opportunities associated with an individual decision problem or opportunity, one decision at a time. Phase 2 is typically the domain of the decision analysis discipline, which is a subset of decision sciences. Phase 3 is running the ongoing business. It's about performance. In other words, delivering on corporate strategic objectives, including implementing the strategic projects and initiatives selected in Phase 2. The ultimate goal is to deliver value to stakeholders, including customers, shareholders, employees, and the community. For Phase 3, the risk focus is on aligning risk exposures with risk appetite and tolerance. Phase 3 is typically the domain of the enterprise risk management discipline, which is chiefly concerned with strategic risks. However, since this phase is about ongoing business, it also encompasses other layers of risk management, including operational risk management and project risk management. Although I've laid out this graphic in a linear way to unpack the phases of the cycle, it is a cycle, and that means Phase 3 reconnects to Phase 1 to continually drive growth and value creation. Also, organizations will typically have activities going simultaneously in 2 or more phases. For the balance of this web share, we'll focus on opportunities to integrate decision analysis with enterprise risk management to enhance decision-making and ultimately enhance growth. It's about creating more value. As we move through the rest of this web share, I may use the acronyms DA for decision analysis and ERM for enterprise risk management. Before we compare the two perspectives, let's have a quick reminder of the way the fields of decision analysis and ERM approach decision-making under uncertainty and risk. On the left side of the slide, I've shown the 6 elements of decision quality to symbolize the main activities of decision analysis. On the right side of the slide, I've shown the main activities of the enterprise risk management process. We aren't going to go into depth here, but they're here for reference when you receive the copy of the slides after the web share. Now let's compare how the fields of DA and ERM approach decision-making under uncertainty and risk. First, both disciplines conduct risk identification, usually through brainstorming with a group of subject matter experts. For decision analysis, the scope of the risk identification task is narrowed to a specific decision opportunity or problem to be solved. The risk identification is typically done as part of the framing of the decision, where many types of issues are identified, not just risks, also assumptions, values, uncertainties, stakeholders, etc. For ERM, the risk identification task has a broader scope that encompasses all the organization's strategic initiatives. Therefore, risk identification typically involves one or more workshops or other data gathering activities focused exclusively on risk identification. The differences on risk assessment are, for DA, risk assessment is mostly quantitative, and it consists of probability distributions to show the impact of risks on the expected value to be generated by each decision alternative. For ERM, risk assessment is mostly qualitative and consists of a risk matrix to show the relative ranking of the organization's principal risk exposures, all of the principal risk exposures. The perspective on the decision stage is also quite different for the two disciplines. For DA, the timing is all pre-decision, with the objective being to recommend a decision alternative that maximizes the potential value of a single project. Whereas for ERM, the timing is all post-decision. It's on implementing strategies or projects or investments. So the objective is to inform the ongoing treatment of a portfolio of risks. And treatments are typically risk prevention activities and risk mitigation activities. Lastly, we'll compare the differences on leadership engagement. For DA, leadership engagement happens primarily through decision dialogue between the project team and the decision maker or decision board. And this happens at key points in the decision process. The two-way communication ensures that there is clarity about key information and that there's sufficient alignment and consensus on the choices to be made. For ERM, leadership engagement is mostly one-way reporting. This reporting has two purposes. The first is monitoring of changes in risk exposures to inform management action. And the second is assurance regarding the effectiveness of risk treatments to support oversight by the executive and board. For decision analysis in Phase 2 transitioning, that decision dialogue is bounded by the duration of the decision process. Whereas for ERM in Phase 3 ongoing business, the monitoring happens in an ongoing way and typically at regular intervals. Now we'll look at some of the common areas where DA and ERM come up short in the experience of many organizations. For DA, it's often too tactical and doesn't consider the wider external issues with long-term impact. This issue was covered in the web share on scenario planning. There's also an over-reliance on risk quantification, with probability distributions taken as a perfect description of risk, even though with DA there is often a tendency to ignore difficult to quantify correlations, future uncertainties, and biases. And then the third item with DA is the lack of a handoff to risk management once the decision is made. So although many risks are identified, even assessed, that information sometimes doesn't make it over to the folks responsible for managing risk. For ERM, some of the shortfalls include, first of all, a defensive mindset, and that really emphasizes value protection over value creation. I often say this leads to the risk paralysis trap, where compliance takes precedence over performance. A second gap is weak quantification with an over-reliance on qualitative approaches, specifically the risk matrix. Risk matrices are great for ranking, but they're not a quantification, and for some risks, especially major risks, it's really imperative to quantify them. Another problem with quantification for ERM is when we do quantify, we do point estimates. And for risks, we know that it's very rarely a point estimate. It's going to be a probability distribution with a range of values. And then finally, this lack of integration with decision making and value creation is, to my mind, one of the biggest shortcomings of ERM. Looking at the unrealized potential of the DA and ERM disciplines sheds some light on integration opportunities. Let's look at 4 of them now. For phase 2 of the growth cycle, DA can kickstart and enhance identification and analysis of risks in phase 2 by importing the risks identified by ERM in phase 3, at least those risks that are relevant for the decision being analyzed. It makes a lot of sense to leverage the extensive efforts that ERM puts into identifying and monitoring a wide range of risks. A second integration opportunity is for DA to export the relevant risks that they've identified for a particular decision, to hand those off to whether it be enterprise risk management, operational risk management, or project management, in order to enhance the post-decision implementation. So in other words, collaborate with risk management to ensure that the risks identified in phase 2 get on the radar of the folks responsible for implementation in the ongoing business phase. A third integration opportunity is on the ongoing business phase side of the growth cycle. Here, ERM can make better use of risk quantification approaches from DA, and that would help to get a more realistic and de-biased understanding of risk exposures. And the fourth integration opportunity I'd like to suggest is for ERM to use the extensive reporting they do to stimulate more decision dialogue. In other words, instead of having it be mostly one-way communication, to make it more of a two-way conversation. Let's summarize the main concepts covered so far. First, silos exist between the DA and ERM disciplines, chiefly because they've evolved to support different phases of the growth cycle. Second, decision-making under uncertainty and risk can be enhanced by embracing and integrating techniques and information across the disciplines of DA and ERM. And thirdly, for risk quantification, we advocate a blend of qualitative and quantitative approaches to get a true picture of risk exposures. And that's true whether you're in phase 2 or phase 3. Now let's look at some practical ways to achieve a better risk lens in decision making. So if you'd like to go further on exploring some of these integration strategies, here are 3 ways you can go about it. So first of all, it's really important to learn what's possible. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll be providing the complimentary copy of the PDF of the chapter I wrote on leveraging ERM for growth. It has a lot of strategies and ideas far beyond what we've had in this web share, so you can get some good ideas there. And that's for how to integrate across all 3 phases of the growth cycle. The other thing we suggest is we have some virtual learning bites on risk quantification, one on range assessment, the range assessment technique, another on a technique called the Italian flag. These are good because one of them focuses on the impact of risks and the other on the likelihood of risks, so estimating both sides of the risk equation. We also have online learning courses that are more intense. The virtual learning bites take a couple of hours to complete. The online learning courses are more like 15 hours to complete. But they have a lot more meat. So we have one on risk quantification that covers a number of different techniques, and another one on probabilistic investment analysis, which is highly relevant for phase 2 of the growth cycle. And then we also offer our masterclass in decision clarity, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. I think that one of the most important techniques is actually to start experimenting. So I would encourage you, if you work on the risk management side, Find some folks in the organization on the decision analysis side and talk with them, explore where you can integrate what you're doing and find ways to collaborate and work together. And the same is true if you're on the DA side, find the risk management folks. And then lastly, you can, if you're ready to start strengthening your organization's capabilities in terms of having a better risk lens on decision making, you may want to look at our upskilling programs or even look at coaching your people in some way to really get better at this. I'd like to share a little more information on our masterclass in decision clarity. The program provides an opportunity to learn to use simple yet powerful tools to structure important decisions and to evaluate strategies to begin to embed decision clarity in your company's DNA. The masterclass consists of 3 integrated components. The first is group training. It's 5 weekly sessions of about 75 minutes duration, and the next program starts on Friday, November the 5th. The second component is self-study materials. This is a 2-hour learning bite that introduces the main concepts behind decision clarity. And the third component is an opportunity to start applying the masterclass concepts in your organization. We support you every step of the way with coaching from experts who have been there. You can learn more by visiting our website. That brings us to the end of this web share. If you have any questions or would like to have a conversation with us about the ideas presented today, all WebShare registrants have received a link where you can book a complimentary video chat with us. You can also reach us by email at team@claridec.com. Thanks for watching.